The night was quiet, too quiet for the forest. Even the crickets had stopped singing, and the only sound was the rustle of wind through the tall trees. John, a human traveler who had been living alone in a wooden cabin, sat near the dim lantern, patching the torn sleeve of his jacket. He thought it would be another silent night like many before. But fate had other plans. A sudden crash echoed through the forest, sharp and heavy, like metal striking against stone. John jumped to his feet, heart pounding. It wasn't thunder. It wasn't an animal. It was something else, something not from this world. He grabbed his flashlight and stepped outside. The cool night air brushed against his skin as he moved through the shadows. The sound came again, closer this time. A strange crackling followed by a shriek that didn't belong to any creature he knew. Branches broke as if something had fallen hard from the sky. John followed the noise until he reached a small clearing. The ground was scorched, smoke rising from a shallow crater. At the center lay a strange pod, silver and broken, glowing faintly as if alive. Steam hissed from its cracks. John's eyes widened. He had heard rumors about aliens but never thought he would stand before proof. And then he heard it, a soft whimper. From the shattered pod crawled a small figure, fragile, trembling and covered in dust. She looked like a child, but not quite, human. Her skin shimmered faintly under the moonlight, tinted with a pale lavender glow. Her hair was long, tangled, and strangely silver blue. But her eyes, large, bright, and glowing gold, were filled with fear. She stumbled forward, clutching her arm, and collapsed on the forest floor. John froze. For a long moment he didn't know what to do. She was tiny, like a lost child, but clearly not human. His instincts told him to be careful. Yet when she lifted her head, her frightened eyes met his, and something inside him shifted. She wasn't a monster. She was hurt. She was scared. John stepped closer. "Hey, it's okay. I won't hurt you." The alien girl tried to stand, but her legs gave out. She let out a weak growl, low and shaky, more like a warning than a threat. Her small hands trembled as if she wanted to fight but had no strength left. John slowly lowered himself, keeping his distance. "Easy, you're safe." Her golden eyes flickered between suspicion and desperation. Then her gaze softened, as if she realized he was the only one there who could help. With one last effort, she whispered something in a language he couldn't understand before collapsing into unconsciousness. John didn't think twice. He lifted her tiny frame into his arms. She was lighter than expected, fragile, almost weightless. She felt cold, too cold. Carrying her back through the forest, John's mind raced. What if someone was looking for her? What if she was dangerous? But when he looked down at her face, pale and bruised, he couldn't ignore the truth. She needed help. Inside his cabin, he laid her gently on his bed. The fire crackled as he wrapped a blanket around her trembling body. Her breathing was shallow, uneven. He gave her water, though most of it spilled from her lips. She stirred faintly, her eyes half opening, watching him with confusion. "You'll be all right," John said softly. For a long while, he just sat by her side, waiting. Hours passed, and the storm outside grew stronger. Rain lashed against the wooden roof. Thunder rolled, but inside the cabin there was silence, except for the shallow breaths of the alien girl. Then, without warning, she sat up. Her eyes glowed brighter than before, and she looked at him with a strange intensity, as if studying every detail of his face. John raised his hand slowly, showing he meant no harm. "You're safe here," he repeated. Her lips parted, but no human words came out, only a strange mix of sounds, soft and melodic. Still, John understood her meaning. She was lost, frightened, and alone. When the thunder rumbled again, she flinched and instinctively grabbed his shirt, pulling herself closer. John's heart skipped a beat. She was trembling, not from cold but from fear. Something deep in her instincts made her cling to him. She didn't know who he was. She didn't know if he could be trusted. But in that moment, she chose him. John slowly placed his hand on her shoulder. Don't worry, I'll protect you." The alien girl's glowing eyes softened. For the first time, she closed them and let herself rest against him. Her breathing steadied, and she finally slipped into sleep. John knew nothing would ever be the same again, because tonight in the middle of the forest an accident had brought a tiny alien girl into his life. And though he didn't know it yet, this was only the beginning. The first step into a story filled with danger, secrets, and emotions neither of them could control. Morning came slowly, with soft beams of sunlight creeping through the cracks of the wooden cabin. The storm had passed, leaving behind fresh air and the smell of wet earth. John rubbed his eyes, exhausted from the night. He had barely slept, keeping watch over the tiny alien girl resting on his bed. She looked different in the daylight. No longer just a broken survivor from the crash, but something fragile, almost innocent. Her pale lavender skin glowed faintly in the morning light, and the silver-blue strands of her hair shimmered as if touched by starlight. John leaned against the table, quietly sipping water, when her golden eyes fluttered open. For a moment, she panicked, sitting up too quickly, her small hands clutching the blanket. She looked around, confused and frightened, as if expecting enemies to be waiting outside. "Easy," John said softly. "You're safe. No one's here but me." She stared at him, her eyes narrowing, as if testing whether his words were true. Slowly, her breathing calmed. She tilted her head, curious, studying him like a wild creature, unsure if the hand reaching out was kind or cruel. John placed a piece of bread and a cup of water near her. "Eat. You need strength." The alien girl hesitated, then reached out with shaking fingers. She sniffed the bread first before nibbling. Her golden eyes never left him, as if she feared it was a trick. When nothing happened, she ate more quickly, almost desperately. Watching her, John felt both pity and awe. She was tiny, delicate, and clearly lost. But there was also something fierce about her, like a small animal that had survived too much. He turned away to give her space and began changing his damp clothes. His shirt clung to his skin from the rain-soaked night, and he pulled it off, reaching for a clean one. He thought she was too busy eating to notice. He was wrong. When John looked back, he caught her staring. Her eyes had widened, glowing faintly, and her face flushed with a strange color, somewhere between pink and violet. She froze with a piece of bread halfway to her mouth, her small chest rising and falling faster. John frowned. "What is it?" The girl quickly looked away, but it was too late. Her reaction was clear. She wasn't just surprised. Something else was happening. She pressed her hands against her chest, trembling, as if fighting an inner storm. Her breathing grew uneven. Confused, John took a cautious step closer. "Are you hurt?" She shook her head sharply, but her glowing eyes betrayed her. She wouldn't meet his gaze, yet she couldn't keep herself from sneaking another glance at him. And every time she did, her blush deepened. It dawned on him slowly. Whatever her species was, seeing him vulnerable, or maybe simply without his shirt, had triggered something in her. The girl whispered something in her language, clutching the blanket tighter. Though John couldn't understand the words, the meaning was almost obvious. Her instincts were pulling her closer to him, even if she didn't want them to. She suddenly growled, low and shaky, forcing her gaze away. "Go away." Her voice was weak, broken, but the meaning came through. John paused, unsure. She was trembling like she was afraid of herself. "All right," he said gently, keeping distance. "I'll stay back." But the damage was done. The tiny alien girl's reaction was not something she could easily control. She buried her face in the blanket, trying to calm down, yet every breath she took seemed heavier. John sat on the far side of the cabin, running a hand through his hair. He didn't know much about aliens, but he wasn't stupid. This wasn't simple shyness. It was something deeper, something tied to instinct. And he could see how much it frightened her. Minutes passed in silence. The girl kept her back to him, but he noticed her shoulders shaking slightly. She wasn't crying, she was struggling, fighting against whatever her body was forcing on her. Finally, John spoke. I don't know what's happening, but you don't need to be afraid of me. I won't hurt you. Whatever this is, we'll figure it out." Her head lifted slightly, golden eyes glistening as she dared to peek at him. His calm voice seemed to soothe her storm. She blinked rapidly, then looked away again, hiding her face. But for the first time, she didn't push him farther. Instead, she whispered softly, almost too low for him to hear. "Safe." John's heart tightened. That one word spoken in broken human tongue told him everything. She had decided, despite her struggle, that he was safe. The awkwardness of the moment lingered, heavy and unspoken. She was still fighting her instincts and he was still confused, but something had shifted between them. She no longer looked at him as just a stranger. She looked at him as someone she couldn't ignore, and though John didn't realize it yet, this awkward encounter would mark the beginning of something far greater, something that would test them both and bind them together in ways no human or alien rule could explain. The cabin grew quiet again. Only the crackle of the fire and the steady beat of rain dripping from the roof filled the silence. John worked quietly at the table, mending an old fishing net, while the alien girl sat curled in the corner of the bed. She clutched the blanket tightly around herself, her golden eyes flickering toward him and then quickly away. It had been hours since the strange reaction she had when she saw him changing. She hadn't spoken another word, but John could feel her watching him, even when she pretended not to. Her struggle was plain to see. Sometimes her small fist clenched as if she wanted to push him away. Other times she leaned forward unconsciously, like her instincts were pulling her closer. It was as if two sides of her heart were at war, fear and trust, instinct and reason. John sighed quietly. He didn't want to frighten her, yet he couldn't. Pretend nothing was happening. "You don't have to be afraid of me," he said softly without turning around. Her breath caught. She blinked quickly and pulled the blanket tighter, hiding half her face. "Whatever you're feeling." "It's okay," John continued. "You're safe here. No one's going to hurt you. Not me, not anyone." The girl shivered. His voice was calm, but those words cut through her defenses. Deep inside, she wanted to believe him, but her instincts screamed louder, because for her kind, trust was not a choice. It was a dangerous bond. She shut her eyes, remembering the warnings of her people. Never reveal your instincts before an outsider. Never allow the bond to form. If it begins, you will not be able to resist. Yet here she was, trapped in a human's cabin, struggling against the very thing she was forbidden to feel. Her chest rose and fell faster as she tried to resist. She dug her nails into the blanket, forcing herself to stay still. But every time John moved, even something simple like adjusting his chair or clearing his throat, her heart jumped, her body reacting in ways she could not control. Finally, she couldn't take it anymore. She stood abruptly, the blanket falling to the floor. John turned, surprised, as she took a shaky step forward. Her golden eyes glowed brighter than before, filled with conflict. She pointed at him with a trembling hand. "Stay away." Her voice was weak but sharp, like the growl of a cornered animal. John didn't move. He simply raised his hands, showing no threat. "All right, I'll keep my distance." But even as she said the words, her body betrayed her. She swayed unsteadily, as if part of her wanted to step closer. Her lips trembled, her breath uneven. John frowned. He could see she was suffering. Whatever her people had done to her, whatever rules or instincts guided her, it was tearing her apart. "You're not my enemy," he said quietly. "And I'm not yours. I don't know what you're fighting, but you don't have to fight alone." The girl froze. No one had ever said those words to her. On her world, weakness was punished. Struggle was shame. Yet this human, who barely knew her, spoke as if he understood her pain. Tears welled in her eyes. She turned her face away quickly, ashamed. Her kind didn't cry, not where others could see. but the weight inside her chest was too heavy to carry alone. Her knees buckled, and she sank to the floor. John stood instantly, worried she was hurt. But when he moved toward her, she let out another shaky growl, warning him to stay back. He stopped, respecting her space, though every part of him wanted to help. The girl hugged herself tightly, rocking slightly, whispering in her own language. The words made no sense to John, but the pain in her voice was clear. He waited, giving her time. Slowly, her whispers faded, replaced by silence. Finally, she lifted her head, her golden eyes meeting his. Her voice was barely a whisper. "Why, safe." John tilted his head. "Safe?" She pointed weakly at him. "Why, make me safe?" He understood then. She wasn't asking about the cabin. She was asking about him. Why would a human, a stranger, choose to protect her when even her own people might not? John gave a small smile. "Because you needed me, and because it's the right thing to do." Her breath hitched. No one had ever said such a simple human thing to her. In her world, everything was about strength, survival rules, but this man, he helped her because he chose to, not because he had to. The girl trembled again, but this time it wasn't fear. It was something new, something terrifying yet warm. She lowered her head, her silver blue hair falling forward, hiding her face. But John saw the faintest curve at the corner of her lips, an expression she had never shown before. A tiny, fragile smile. For the first time since the accident, she allowed herself to breathe freely. But deep inside, her struggle was far from over, because instincts could not be erased, and as much as she tried to fight them, she knew the bond was already beginning to form, and bonds, once formed, could never be broken. The night returned, heavy and quiet. The fire in the cabin burned low, casting soft orange light across the wooden walls. Outside, the forest was silent again, but John could not relax. His thoughts kept drifting back to the alien girl sitting in the far corner of the bed. She hadn't spoken much all day, only small words here and there. But her golden eyes told a story. Every glance was filled with conflict, fear, confusion, and something deeper that John could not name. He pretended to busy himself, sharpening his hunting knife and checking supplies, yet his attention always drifted back to her. She sat with her knees pulled to her chest, hugging the blanket as if trying to make herself small. Her silver blue hair glimmered faintly in the firelight. At last, John broke the silence. "You've been quiet. Too quiet." The girl's head snapped up. Startled, she lowered her gaze quickly, avoiding his eyes. "I don't mean to scare you," John added gently, "but keeping it all inside, it looks like it's hurting you." For a long moment there was no reply, only the soft pop of burning wood. Then slowly, the girl lowered her knees and let the blanket slide down. She looked at him, her golden eyes shimmering as if holding back tears. Her lips moved, forming sounds of her language, soft, melodic, but broken. She struggled, forcing herself to find the human words she had practiced silently all day. "Me? Wrong." John frowned. "Wrong. No. You're not wrong." She shook her head quickly, pressing her palm against her chest. "Inside. Wrong." Her breathing grew heavy. She trembled as if confessing a crime. John stayed quiet, letting her continue. "My kind. When see." She pointed at him with a shaking hand, her face flushing a deep violet. "When see. Safe. Body not listen. Heart. Not listen. Want. Near." John froze, the meaning sinking in. He finally understood. Her instincts weren't just fear. They were pulling her toward him. Seeing him in that vulnerable moment changing his clothes had triggered something powerful inside her. Something she couldn't control. The girl looked away, ashamed. "This. Forbidden. My people. Kill if no." Her voice cracked. for her to even admit this was dangerous. She hugged herself tightly, rocking slightly as if the weight of her confession was too much to bear. John set down the knife carefully and moved a little closer, though he kept distance so she wouldn't feel trapped. "So that's what you've been fighting?" Her eyes lifted slowly, uncertain. "You're scared because of what your people would say, but—" He paused, choosing his words carefully. "You don't have to be scared of me. I don't think you're wrong. Not for what you feel, not for who you are." The girl's lips parted, but no sound came. She stared at him, shocked. For so long, she had lived under rules that punished her for feelings she couldn't control. And now, this human simply accepted them, accepted her. Tears welled in her golden eyes. She tried to hide them by turning away, but her shoulders shook. John didn't push her. He just sat quietly, letting her have that moment. Finally, she whispered, almost too soft to hear, "Why? You kind?" "Because someone has to be," John answered simply. Her tears slipped free. She quickly wiped them, ashamed. But John caught a glimpse of her fragile smile beneath the sorrow. She leaned back against the wall, exhausted from the weight she had carried. For the first time since the accident, her body relaxed, her hands no longer clutching the blanket so tightly. She looked smaller, softer, like a child who had been fighting battles far too heavy for her shoulders. John felt a heavy responsibility settle over him. Protecting her wasn't just about keeping her safe from the outside world anymore. It was also about protecting her from herself, from the fear and shame her people had planted in her heart. He shifted closer, slow and careful. "Listen, you're not alone anymore. Whatever this bond is, whatever you're feeling, well, we'll figure it out together." The girl's golden eyes widened, and for a heartbeat she let herself believe his words. Her lips trembled, and she whispered again, this time steadier. "Together." That single word carried more weight than she realized. The fire flickered, low, shadows dancing across the cabin walls. For the first time, the silence between them was not heavy, but peaceful. The awkward fear had softened into something fragile, something new. But John knew this peace would not last. If her people were out there, if they were searching, they would not stop until they found her. And when they did, they would see him as a thief who had stolen what was forbidden. The confession had brought them closer, but it also painted a target on both their backs. John looked at the girl one last time before the fire died completely. She was already drifting to sleep, her head resting lightly against the wall. Despite her struggle, despite her fear, she looked at peace in that moment. And John whispered softly to the darkness, a promise to himself as much as to her, "I'll protect you, no matter what comes." Outside, in the shadows of the forest, unseen eyes were already watching. The forest was no longer silent. For days, John had felt something strange, movements in the trees, shadows where there should have been none, and the faint sound of steps that didn't belong to animals. He had learned to listen to the forest during his lonely years, and now it whispered danger. Inside the cabin, the tiny alien girl stirred uneasily in her sleep. Her golden eyes fluttered, her body tense as if sensing the same thing. She woke, suddenly sitting upright, her gaze darting to the door. Her instincts screamed, someone was coming. John placed a finger to his lips. "Stay quiet," he whispered. The girl hugged the blanket tightly, trembling. "Hunters," she breathed, her voice barely audible. John froze. So it was true. Her people had found her. He reached for his old hunting rifle, the one he had kept more for scaring off wolves than real battle. His hands tightened around the weapon. Wolves were nothing compared to what he might face tonight. A heavy knock rattled the cabin door. "Open," a harsh voice commanded, speaking in a broken version of the human tongue. "Give us the girl." The alien girl's face drained of color. She clutched John's sleeve desperately, shaking her head. "No, please, don't let them take me." John looked into her glowing eyes. Fear, despair, and something more. Trust. She believed he could protect her. He swallowed hard, forcing calm into his voice. "I won't." The knock turned into pounding. Wood splintered under the force. Shadows moved outside the window. 3, maybe 4 figures, tall and armored, their eyes glowing faintly in the darkness. John's heart raced. He had faced wild animals, storms, hunger, but never this. Still, he stood tall, placing himself between the girl and the door. "Leave," he shouted back. "She's not going anywhere." A cruel laugh echoed. "Human, weak, do not fight us. She is property of her tribe." The girl gasped, tears filling her eyes. Property, that was what they saw her as. Nothing more. John's grip on the rifle tightened. "She's not property. Not to you. Not to anyone." The door crashed open. 3 alien hunters stormed inside, towering over John. Their skin was darker shades of violet, their armor crude but strong, and each carried jagged weapons that shimmered with strange energy. Their golden eyes locked onto the tiny girl, who whimpered and tried to hide behind John. "Move, human," the tallest snarled. "She belongs to us." John's heart thundered, but he stood firm. "If you want her, you'll have to go through me." The hunters grinned, showing sharp teeth. They had expected fear, begging, surrender. Instead, they found defiance. The tallest stepped forward, raising his weapon. "Then you die." The cabin exploded into chaos. John fired his rifle. The blast roared in the small room, hitting the first hunter square in the chest. The alien staggered back, growling in pain, though the shot hadn't killed him. The other 2 lunged forward. "Run!" John shouted to the girl, but she didn't. Instead, she cried out, "No, I stay!" Her instincts wouldn't let her leave him. One hunter swung his jagged blade, and John barely ducked in time. The weapon sliced through wood, sparks flying. John slammed the butt of his rifle into the alien's jaw, sending him crashing into the wall. The girl pressed herself against the corner, eyes wide, hands trembling. She wanted to fight, but she was too small, too weak. Her people had always told her she was useless, but now, as she watched John stand alone against 3 of her own kind, something inside her burned. The tallest hunter roared and charged again. John fired once more, but the shot grazed his shoulder. The alien raised his weapon high, ready to strike. Suddenly, a loud crack echoed. The girl had grabbed a burning log from the fireplace and swung with all her strength. The log smashed against the hunter's back, flames scattering across his armor. He screamed, twisting in fury. John seized the moment. With a roar, he drove his shoulder into the alien, knocking him to the ground. His rifle clattered away, but his fists did not stop. Blow after blow, he fought like a man possessed, not for himself, but for her. The hunters, stunned by his ferocity, faltered. Humans were supposed to be weak prey, easy to crush. Yet this one fought like fire itself. The last hunter snarled, grabbing the girl by the arm. She cried out, struggling, her golden eyes wide with terror. "No!" John roared. With desperate strength, he ripped the alien away from her and hurled him against the wall. The cabin shook from the impact. Breathing hard, John stood between her and the fallen hunters, his chest heaving, his hands bleeding. "You won't take her," he growled. "Not while I'm alive." The hunters staggered to their feet, wounded and humiliated. They exchanged glances, realizing this battle would not be so easy. One hissed, "This is not over, human. She is ours. We will return." With that, they slipped back into the night, leaving the cabin broken and bloody but still standing. Silence fell again. John leaned against the table, catching his breath. His body ached, his knuckles raw. He turned to see the girl trembling, tears streaming down her face. She rushed to him, clutching his arm tightly, her small body shaking. "You protect me." John placed a hand gently on her shoulder, his voice steady despite his exhaustion. "Always." She buried her face against him, her instincts no longer something she could fight. For the first time, she felt what safety truly meant. Not from her people, but from a human who refused to let her go. And in that fragile moment, John understood. The hunters would return. This was only the beginning. The cabin was in ruins, Wooden planks splintered, furniture broken, and the smell of smoke hung heavy in the air. John leaned against the wall, breathing hard, his knuckles bruised and bleeding. The tiny alien girl clung to his sleeve, her golden eyes shimmering with tears. For a long while neither spoke. The fire crackled weakly, struggling to stay alive in the fireplace. The hunters were gone, but their threat still lingered like a shadow. Finally, the girl whispered, her voice trembling. "They come back." John nodded. He knew she was right. They had retreated only because they were wounded, not because they had given up. They would return, stronger and angrier. And when they did, it would be war. But for now there was silence. The girl looked up at him, her small hands tightening on his arm. "Why? You fight?" Her words were broken, but her meaning was clear. Why risk everything for her? Why put his life between her and death? John lowered himself onto a chair, wincing at the pain in his shoulder. He looked at her seriously. "Because you needed me, and because no one deserves to be treated like that. Not as property, not as prey." Her lips trembled. No one in her tribe would have spoken those words. They would have told her to obey, to submit. Yet this human, who had known her only for a short time, saw her as someone worth protecting. Her chest ached with a strange warmth. It frightened her almost as much as the hunters did. That night she couldn't sleep. She sat by the window, staring out into the forest, her silver blue hair glowing faintly in the moonlight. John lay on the floor near the fire, exhausted, but his eyes half open, watching her. "You should rest," he murmured. She shook her head. "If I sleep, they come." John pushed himself up, sitting across from her. "Then we'll face them, together." Her golden eyes widened. Together? The word tasted strange on her tongue, but also sweet. Still, her instincts twisted inside her. She wanted to trust him completely, to lean on him. But trust was dangerous. What if he betrayed her? What if, one day, he decided she was not worth saving? Her kind had warned her, trust no one. Bonds are weakness. But then she remembered the way John had fought, bleeding, roaring, refusing to give up even when 3 hunters towered over him. That wasn't weakness, that was strength born from something deeper. The girl hugged her knees, torn between fear and longing. Finally, she whispered, "I don't know how trust." John studied her quietly. He saw not just a strange alien child, but someone broken by years of cruelty. Slowly, he picked up a piece of cloth and wrapped it around his bleeding hand. "Trust isn't easy," he said softly. "It's like this wound. It hurts at first, but if you give it time, if you take care of it, it heals. And once it heals, you're stronger than before." Her golden eyes softened. She wanted to believe him. Hours passed, and dawn painted the sky pale gold. The girl finally dozed off in the chair, her head tilted, her small frame trembling with every sound from the forest. John gently lifted her and laid her on the bed. She stirred but didn't resist, her hand unconsciously clutching his sleeve even in sleep. He sat beside her, whispering, "You can trust me. I won't leave you." But peace didn't last. By afternoon, new tracks appeared in the forest, heavier, more numerous. The hunters were gathering again. John's jaw tightened. This time it wouldn't just be 3. The girl sensed it too. When she woke, she whispered fearfully, "Many. More." John nodded grimly. "Then we stand stronger." He began preparing, reinforcing the cabin door, setting traps around the clearing, sharpening his old hunting knives. The girl watched him silently, her small hands clutching the edge of the table. Part of her wanted to run, but another part, the louder part, wanted to fight beside him. Finally, she stood. "Teach me." John looked at her, surprised. "Teach you?" She nodded firmly, though her hands trembled. "Fight. With you." The night was heavy with silence, the kind that warned of danger. John stood at the cabin door, rifle in hand, eyes scanning the dark forest. The alien girl sat near the fire, clutching the wooden stick he had given her. Her golden eyes glowed, faintly, reflecting both fear and determination. They both knew the hunters were coming. And then, the forest moved. Shadows shifted between the trees. Dozens of glowing golden eyes appeared in the darkness. The hunters had returned, not 3 this time, but many. Their armor gleamed under the moonlight, their jagged weapons humming with cruel energy. The girl's breath hitched. Too many, John's jaw tightened. Then we make our stand. The hunters surrounded the cabin. Their leader, taller and more heavily armored than the rest, stepped forward. His voice was deep and cruel. Human, give her to us. She is ours. This is your last chance. John stepped out of the cabin, the rifle steady in his hands. No, she doesn't belong to you. She belongs to herself. The hunters laughed, their sharp teeth glinting. The leader's gaze shifted to the girl inside the cabin. Tiny one, you cannot fight your blood. Come back, or watch your protector die. The girl's heart pounded. For so long she had been told she was weak, worthless property, and now, faced with her tribe's demand, she felt the weight of the choice pressing down on her. If she surrendered, John would live, but she would lose herself forever. Her small hands trembled, gripping the stick tighter. She could run to them now, beg them to spare him. But when her golden eyes met John's, she saw the truth. He wasn't asking her to surrender. He was asking her to choose who she wanted to be. The hunters charged. John fired, the rifle booming through the night. One hunter fell, but the others surged forward. He grabbed a knife and slashed, fighting with every ounce of strength left in his body. He moved like a storm, dodging, striking, never backing down, but there were too many. One blade cut across his arm, another slammed into his side, knocking him to the ground. He coughed, blood staining his lips, yet he pushed himself up again. His voice roared through the chaos. Stay back. You'll have to kill me first. The girl screamed his name, her instincts exploding inside her. Something broke free in her chest, a fire hotter than fear. She threw down the blanket, her golden eyes burning brighter than the hunters. No, she cried, her voice shaking the air. Not him. The hunters froze, shocked. The leader snarled, You dare! But she didn't let him finish. She rushed forward, small and fragile yet fierce. She swung her stick, striking one hunter in the face. He stumbled back, more surprised than hurt. Another lunged, but she ducked, her instincts guiding her like never before. Her tribe had called her nothing. But standing beside John, she felt like everything. John, bleeding and battered, looked at her with wide eyes. She had chosen, not fear, not surrender. She had chosen him. The hunters hesitated. Their law was clear. Once the bond formed, it could not be broken. To take her by force now would not only shame them, it would defy their own tradition. The leader growled, furious, but bound by the rules of his people. His golden eyes burned with hate as he spat. She has made her choice, but human, you have made an enemy of us all. With that, the hunters retreated into the forest, their glowing eyes fading into the darkness. The night grew quiet once. John collapsed to one knee, clutching his bleeding side. The girl ran to him, tears streaming down her face. No, don't leave me, he smiled weakly, wiping a tear from her cheek. I'm not going anywhere, she sobbed, pressing her forehead against his chest. I choose you, always. John wrapped his arm around her, holding her close despite the pain. And I'll protect you, always. For the first time, the girl felt free. She was no longer property, no longer weak. She had stood against her people, and she had chosen her own path. The bond between her and the human was not weakness. It was strength. The dawn came slowly, painting the forest in gold. The cabin was broken, but inside something new had been built. 2 souls, human and alien, bound not by fear, but by choice. And though danger still lingered, and enemies would surely come again, one truth was clear. She was no longer alone. And neither was he. Together they would face whatever the galaxy brought.